estranged between Trump and Pence there. But, you know, acting cordial, acting polite, shaking hands. Obama with Pence now, and former Vice President Al Gore there. So, like I said, Stephanie, we don't see these scenes very often. We'll see whether or not former President Obama and President-elect Trump are cordial and shake hands. They're seated right next to each other. A very, very frosty relationship between the two, nonetheless.
And we do see them actually exchanging some conversation right there as they are seated next to one another. But it's interesting, and we've spoken about this, in times such as this, it brings people together on a human level. You can disagree with politics, but you set that aside to honor the person. And there is George W. Bush right there shaking hands and saying hello with Laura Bush there as well. So we are seeing, of course, a number of former presidents seated together, you know, being cordial, as you said. But again, this is not a day or time to focus on the political nature, but perhaps more of the human nature. And we saw that with former President Jimmy Carter. He didn't necessarily agree politically with certain individuals, but looking beyond that to perhaps that human foundation that we all share.
Yeah, I just have to note for the American history buffs watching, you saw there the interaction between Al Gore and George W. Bush, of course, in that very heated election of 2000, Stephanie. Bush beating Gore by about 500 votes in a Supreme Court decision in Florida. And, you know, everyone is acting cordial. That is what American politics, when it is civil, is all about. You see the Clintons now in the front row. And so we're really seeing one or two generations of American politics all gathered in the same space, all gathered in the same room. It is truly remarkable, Stephanie. And, you know, it's not morbid to say this, that funerals like this are really the only places we get to see this, other than inaugurations. Yes, inaugurations happen every 4 years, and you see there the Clintons,
Andrew,
the Bushes.
I have to ask you this. You know,
looks
one
like
of our producers,
former First Lady Michelle Obama not in attendance.
And that's what I was going to ask you about,
why there,
Andrew.
and then the Trumps there.
Yes, that was what I was going to ask you about. One of our producers, Tania, did also note the absence of Michelle Obama right there, not seated next to her husband, former President Barack Obama. Is that something that we were expecting, or perhaps this is not? Is this a surprise or not a surprise? I think people might be a little surprised not to see her there next to her husband.
Yeah, we'll have to see if there's any reporting on it kind of after the fact. It could just be, you know, a scheduling conflict. But this was not reported kind of going into the funeral. So we'll have to kind of check our sources there to see, you know, what might explain the absence. But yeah, maybe we shouldn't look too much into that fact, though. And you see there, it looks like things are about to get underway, but it does look like the dignitaries are seated now in the front row, and then the family, of course, will
Andrew, I have a
be
question
seated,
for you.
And then the eulogizers will be seated there in those empty seats. We're still waiting for President Biden and the First Lady.
Andrew, I do have a question as we do await the service to get underway momentarily. How does one determine the seating? Do you know that? I mean, we see that certain former presidents are seated next to other presidents, but how does the seating chart work when it comes to a funeral service such as this? I think that's something perhaps we may not know, but I think, you know, our viewers might be curious. Is there a strategy to it? Is there a tradition behind it?
There's a strategy behind it. You can kind of tell now it goes kind of in descending order. The vice president there, the second gentleman, walking into the cathedral. So the highest ranking dignitaries sit up front, and lower ranking dignitaries kind of file in there after. You see former vice presidents seated behind former presidents, and kind of thereon and going on. So that's kind of the strategy, so to speak. Somewhat self-explanatory, because you see in descending order Trump, Obama, Bush, Clinton, and the like. And so you see the vice president there, Harris, and the second gentleman. And just, kind of think about this, the electoral acknowledgement of the 2024 election. Harris and Trump, I believe, possibly the first time they are in the same room since Harris's election loss and Trump's election victory. Politics is very passionate, it's very raw, but to your point, Stephanie, moments like this, tempers are put aside for at least a couple of hours to come together to show kind of a bipartisan front of unity, saying goodbye to former leaders like this. But no doubt, these are scenes, like I said, I'm going to repeat myself and reiterate that we just do not get very often here. The election was just now about 2 months ago. The inauguration coming up in 11 days. The Biden-Harris administration winding down. And the closing of one chapter, the opening of another. I just want to reiterate and repeat that. And that's what we're seeing on full display. Yes, the tributes, the celebrations, the mourning, but also just kind of the sheer underbelly and undertone of politics as well today.